Hello. So, throughout all this, I was at the BBC. I'm now not at the BBC, just recently. Still at Bogons, though. So it's an interesting time, as all times are interesting for the people who are in it, and then it's all history afterwards. 25 years seems a lot. Seems a lot to me as well, but it's a quarter of a really long time. So it's not really that big after all. And the further people get into the future, people will probably look at a very little bit of it. So it'll be interesting to see if any of this bit is remembered. Exchanges seem to have lasted throughout this whole cycle, which is interesting because there's quite a lot of pressure for commercial entities to try and replace all that. And some of the exchanges here had that sort of growing pains of should it turn commercial or should they stay as member-owned things. Fortunately, it stayed as member-owned because that's been the best thing for everybody so far. I think that's a thing that throughout the history of the internet, there's always been this tension of does someone need to own everything or can it be a more diverse individual aggregate of lots of the things that are not going to be influenced by the others too much and they can keep some diversity in there and things working. And not be bent to the whims of any one organisation. So there's quite a lot of that stuff. That's been basically our history has been that tension, I think, between should we all be using what at the time was AOL or should we be using the internet? And the internet won, and I hope that persists. And at the time, we didn't know all this stuff was going to come. We were just doing what we're doing. So it was about to take off. But the internet actually, the history actually starts before the internet. It's just we don't remember that stuff because there was no way of recording it. But we've got the internet to record everything now, except for traffic graphs. But that's good. That means I don't have to remember a lot of it myself. I can go and Google it, or you can Google it, so I don't actually need to give this talk. And a lot of you remember it all anyway because you're here. This is your fault. Put your hand up if you're here throughout most of that 25. Yeah. So you can all hassle each other because this is all your fault. And a key thing about this actually is history is written by somebody else usually. We don't know. We're not normally good at writing history ourselves. We just assume someone else, historians, will look after that and write it down for us. But they don't know we're here and they don't know what we did. So actually the best thing you want to do if you want to anything of this sort of stuff to remember is do events like this or do talks at UK North or write it down yourself because otherwise it will be forgotten and someone else will claim it as the things they did instead. And that's fine. That's what happens. Things get history aggregated. There's usually somebody that gets responsibility for everything. That's not really the case. There's always lots of people like ourselves that actually did the stuff. And it was the aggregation of a lot of that detail that made the thing that somebody else is claiming the success of. And it's often forgotten, but really that should be remembered because that's what encourages more people to do the next thing. If you think you have to be in charge of Google to do something, it's like nobody's going to do anything because most people realise it's never going to be them. So I started before internet, started at the BBC as a transmitter engineer, not quite as far back as that picture suggests. But it was, it's a modern version of the same thing. We moved away from valves, we got semiconductors and integrated circuits and other things and made things smaller, faster, better. And that's how the internet started. Started with things that weren't really good enough and got to things that were maybe almost good enough. I've got a history of what I did at the BBC's online, so you can Google for that. You don't need to go through it all. I'll just mention a few bits along the way that sort of line up with the lineup thing. But the key thing coming from the broadcast background was it was from a public service point of view, in that we were doing it for people to help people. The BBC had in its charter some quite important values that guided what it should do, tried to stop it from going the wrong direction. You can argue whether that was the right direction or not, but it's there. And I think the important thing that it is there rather than these things get squashed. So I think the public value part of it is a key thing we need to try and retain on the internet. And something I've been trying to do as the BBC is try and keep what we can going on the internet as a public service thing and counteract some of the commercial stuff. It's not that the commercial stuff is bad, it's just on its own. It's a race to the bottom, and you really don't want that. We need something that has to have that tension of making people do better, making people think of things that are more useful for people rather than just short-term monetary gain. So, it was a pretty good 10 years. I really enjoyed the BBC stuff. We didn't really know what we were doing or why we were doing it. We just had an idea that this was great and it's going to really do some useful stuff later. So I put the BBC in the internet, used to run all the infrastructure for that for a long time. It was quite hard. I'm sure even in commercial organisations, people doing the same thing at the same time had the same pressures. Trying to get money is quite hard in the BBC. It's like herding cats. It's hard for everybody to do it, but we managed to get some stuff to do it. Everybody did, and we made this internet thing. One thing we did find that seems to work on the internet well is the way we eventually figured to sell it internally was it was basically a crack model. Rather than going to the bosses and saying, we need to do this big thing, it's going to be wonderful, and they wouldn't believe it. What we had to start doing was find some people who might believe a bit of it, feed them a bit of it, get them to do it, and then they would go and tell everybody. And the more people we got doing that, suddenly the message starts coming up to higher up, and they start saying, wait a minute, there's something going on here. And that's basically how the internet evolved from just a few people to lots of people. We don't seem to really follow that model so much because now things are mostly VC, and you figure that you've got to go and try and beg someone with lots of money to get you to be able to do anything, whereas the reality is, internet, anybody can start doing it. You might have to go and beg some VCs at some point if you want to go really big, but it's better actually if you can just do it yourself, because then you can actually do what you want rather than what other people tell you should do. So we did that at BBC, we grew stuff, we started streaming stuff, audio, then video, 96, 97. It wasn't a thing when we started doing it, and it became a thing as we went along. Started with a bit of audio, that got popular, radio stations got popular. There was quite a thing going on with international DJs at the time that built up on the back of that, because quite a lot of UK DJs, they do their stuff on the Friday night shows and things, and that would be listened to by people in the States on the internet, and the DJs over there would take them up, and that led to the, can't say it's in causality, but there was quite a growth of the international DJ circuit where UK DJs did quite well travelling to other countries to play their tunes. That helped people see that there was actually some value in the connectivity between separate places. It didn't have to be that the BBC could only be in the UK and you had to have a different organisation anywhere. It started to grow actually on the internet, anybody can be global. So we did that, we did some postage stamp video. Laughable initially just pushed progressive JPEGs and literally were postage stamp size because we didn't have a lot of bandwidth. As Paul said, you were really going somewhere if you had a 2 meg circuit. When I put the BBC on originally, we had a 64K circuit to Pipex, and that was big then. And when we got to 8 meg, and then eventually, 2 meg and then 8 meg, that was really getting quite big and expensive. So we did quite a lot of streaming, and basically that's what iPlayer became. It was a similar video on demand service and a live service. And that was 10 years prior to it getting all rebranded as iPlayer. And that's a common thing. It takes, particularly in the BBC, 10 years for anything to happen. It starts, it has to be ridiculed for a while, then it gets a bit okay, and then eventually some people buy into it, and eventually someone in charge will say, I want to be in charge of this because it's going to be big. And then you get departments formed and money put into things and things launched, which is exactly what happened with iPlayer. We've been doing it for ages. And then some people decided, that looks good, I can make something of that, I can make a career of it. We'll relaunch it and it'll be my thing. That's why I was saying you have to tell everybody what you do and write it down, because the people who come and make the big thing later will be the ones who get credit for it. And just, don't want to play down all the CERN part of it, but there were other wide area services distributing content before the web. It's just they're all forgotten. And we've got just the one now. That change? There we go. So at that time, that 10 years, basically the internet and things we were doing, we did everything. It was pretty rubbish. We didn't have enough bandwidth, enough tech, money, customers, users, anything. There was not enough of anything, but we did a bit of everything. All the things you see today is pretty much done then, just in a very rubbish form. And a common trait at the time, or trope even, was that the internet's breaking. We were constantly breaking the internet just by doing too much streaming or too much something. Web servers would fall over, we'd fill up bandwidth. And I think the biggest thing we did at the time, when within it was about 3 months of us doing our first video stream, which was the handover of the first official video stream, was the handover of Hong Kong in '97. Then a few months later, there was a road crash and a princess died, and suddenly we're doing the biggest webcast ever, syndicating our stream all around the world to AOL and others. It wasn't very big, but it was the biggest, big at the time. What we did learn out of that was those impulses put into a system like this just didn't work. They tended to break it. So we tended to move to a more, trying to apply gradual growth. It didn't really work because there are always steps, but we managed to moderate them to keep a constant pressure on, bring on more demand, and then just give people time to actually build out to accommodate it. Today we do the extreme of it, in that when we started doing UHD streams, we've been capping the number of concurrent viewers to within capacity. And that's because nowadays you tend to buy quite a lot of CDN services, and you buy specific capacity, and they only have so much anyway. And it's in nobody's interest for it to fail. Although it was fun, things falling over, and just seeing how far it could go, now there's a lot more conservative approach taken. People don't like things breaking, which is a shame, because the breaking is actually how we found out how things worked well and didn't work, and we knew what to fix next. So we just constantly pushed the thing, and that took us from postage stamp video to be able to do HD. Just that constant growth of the net, setting expectations that this will grow and continue growing, so people can't just put some stuff in and say, right, we're grand for 10 years, we don't need to invest anymore. It's setting expectations so people know that, yeah, I've put this in, but I need to plan for what I'm going to do next year and the year beyond it, and keep doing this. And we've seen that with the IXs. They've managed to accommodate that growth, and we've just been piling on more and more traffic. It's good. People have handled it. And that's one of the reasons we joined Lonark. Links wouldn't let us join originally because of the rules. We managed to break those rules eventually. I'm not sure quite which did it most, joining Lonark or the other things we did that encouraged the change of the rules. But we kept both, because we do like diversity in there. As Paul says, it's good to have two of everything, because if you only have one and you don't like it, you're stuck. And you can't necessarily just fire up another one to replace it. But if you keep two going and they feed them, keep them healthy, they keep some competitive pressure on there, and each thinks the others could take over should the one fail, so they need to do better. I think that's the thing that all today's platforms don't really do. They all want to be the one. It's all unicorn fever. There can only be one of anything. And that leads us to everyone being stuck on a particular platform that's going downhill. Not mentioning any names. So after that, it was done. Nothing more to do. We got there. We had internet. We had streaming video, audio, various social platforms and things. Everything was done. And it did feel like, that first phase didn't feel like we were going to the moon, but once we got to the end of it, it felt like we got somewhere. There was a thing, lots of people using it. It was quite a big industry that no one really expected to exist. And we just need to carry on persisting it. Nothing more to do after that. But there was never enough of this stuff. BT had offered to fibre up the UK, and we were hitting the limits of what they could do with copper. We did have ambitions of having seen what we could do with audio and video. I wanted to put all of broadcast on there, and it became clear it could be a successor for traditional broadcast at some point if we could carry on growing it. And that's one of the reasons we've tried to put so much pressure on people to get fibre, because there was a clear end of road with copper. It was not going to go anywhere. And with that election, BT did offer to fibre the country in '97. But Tony decided he didn't want to do that, which is a real shame. That's a missed opportunity. There's probably many reasons for it, and BT had their own reasons for wanting to do it, because they wanted to get into TV, and the government was trying to protect the cable TV network that was freshly growing. And I think it was a wrong move to try and judge which technology should be the winner. And to this day, we still have those cable networks in the ground, and people still trying to replace bits of it with fibre, and we still have the copper phone network in the ground with people trying to replace it with bits of fibre. And I think we missed out by good 10, maybe even 20 years just by not taking that opportunity when it was offered. And it wasn't even a democratic decision. One person decided that we shouldn't have this future, and that should never be the case. We should decide our future. Anyway, we thought everything was going to be taken over by these big companies. They were going to build all the stuff in future. This was all going to be product. Unfortunately, it didn't work out like that. We had a little sit down, and lots of things crashed. We had based on having crashed the internet quite a lot, we were actually in a fortunate position at that time. I think there's two levels of crash. One is the things we do, and one is other things other people do. We have control of what we do, but obviously 9/11 we had no control of, and the dot-com bust we had no control of. So we tried to protect against some of them. When I first got some proper funding, when the BBC officially moved into the internet, because although we've been doing it for ages, it wasn't until '97 that we actually got some money to really do it. And actually got government approval for us to do it, which is a key thing. So I'd actually split our infrastructure between UK and New York. Some of that was for capacity reasons and just a bit of redundancy, because we thought, well, someone had blown Docklands up before, maybe they'll do it again. And it turns out someone blew New York up instead. And our data centre was at 25 Broadway, a couple of blocks down the road from that. So it got through it, but it didn't last very long before it was covered in dust. The generators got covered in dust, clogged up, conked out, ran out of fuel, all sorts of things. The key thing out of that we had done for it was to build in some redundancy so we could go back to the UK. We didn't have enough capacity for the entire world because we never had enough money to build capacity for everything everywhere, but we had some redundancy. And I think a key thing is, do we have sufficient redundancy in today's stuff? How many people just use one AWS region? How many times has that gone down? Not many times, but enough. How many times could it go down in the future? How many clouds are we actually using? Just one, really, nowadays. I mean, the others are not really going anywhere. Not to put them down too much, but I think the shine has gone off Google, and Microsoft are carrying on as best they can, but AWS gets all the credit. And if we're not careful and we don't feed the other ones, we'll end up with only AWS. And it's not that AWS is bad, but if it is the only one, then it could go bad. You have no control over that. So diversity is a key thing for that as well. It's been there forever, and I think it should be forever. We need to use more things, encourage new things to come in that will replace them should the ones we have go bad. Because everything gets too big. It's like people used to buy IBM stuff. They figured they only need to do that because it always works, it's always good enough, but it leads to stagnation. And then you had to have market changes that caused IBM to redo stuff, make PCs instead of mainframes, all that sort of stuff. We need this to carry on with the internet. Everything needs to be a constant cycle of refresh rather than just figuring we've done one thing, it'll last forever. Anyway, we scrambled through all the 9/11 stuff and various things. And then we got to another 10 years that were probably the best as well, but differently best. The world obviously had a difficult financial time. We spent most of our time actually enjoying it. We did the Olympics 2012, did 8K streaming from that, did it live. UK was the best place in the world for a brief period. And we thought that was actually going to carry on. It's like that, we've really got somewhere and we're going to carry on going somewhere. And it would have been really good if we could have kept up that momentum and really done something with it. But it was still a good year, a good set of years. We did quite a lot on technology and the things I was interested in, which is trying to get the internet ready for all of TV to move to it. The key part of that was the Commonwealth Games, where we did entirety, in parallel with non-broadcast because it was just a trial, as IP from the camera all the way to the consumer at UHD, and everything was done in software. And that was a key thing. I mean, the internet has taught us something, is that if you want to build hardware, you've got a long lead time, and we know that from broadcasting, the stuff tends to stay around too long, and you can't iterate it, change it. So we tried to move the entirety of broadcast to IP and to software to give us the flexibility to grow and evolve at internet pace. And that was just a starter for it. We did all that in Glasgow. It was great. And that's what led to UHD streaming you now got on iPlayer. A lot of that stuff came out of that. And we did quite a lot of work on the codecs, 264, 265, to make that possible. For Commonwealth Games, we had parity of bit rate. It was 35 megabits UHD at that point, but we did the same bit rate on the internet as we did of DTT. And that was that's a key turning point, almost a crossover point, where you say, actually, this internet is now getting big enough. We can do more than we can do in the limited spectrum we've got for broadcast. And that's now sort of had a while to percolate through people's minds, and we're now seeing everybody saying, actually, let's do it on the internet. Why build a big broadcast network and all those transmitters and things? We don't need that. So we're now looking at switching that stuff off. There was talk about doing it in 2025, maybe 2028, and it's getting pushed to 2030 and maybe 2035. But for a while, people had quite an expectation of when this would flip over, and they've backed off a bit on that, but we're getting there. If this thing carries on, it could happen sooner. It's now down to when the audience moves across rather than when the tech is ready. Which you can say the same thing for social platforms. A lot of them grew, but I'm not sure they're any better than the ones that were described earlier. We really don't have anything as good as Usenet. It's really disappointing. We probably need to build something. I don't know how we do it nowadays. That's the problem. Who's going to do it? We need the social stuff to get away from these fiefdoms of just someone trying to turn it into a big money spinner, then it all goes wrong. We needed a better way to evolve those things as a common set of infrastructure. We've got it for the networks. We've got all the ISPs here. We haven't turned them all into one ISP. So why do all the other things have to be one thing? Because you got one thing. There's always going to be someone trying to herd it into one box for their own gain. It makes sense. It's the way commercial things work. But this is a social thing. It needs, I'm not socialist or anything, but you need a bit of each. Just total one way or the other never works. Centrist is always something useful. And the tension between the two always helps. So I think we need to actually figure out what I said about how the platforms work, but also keep that in mind for exchanges, ISPs, people providing services on that, and people who own the content. Yeah, I know. I'm over budget on time as well as years. I think we've done 20 years and there's a lot more to go. Anyway, we need to not just shut our eyes while megacorps take over and make bazillionaires trying to take all the money. And it does make a mess of everything. Look at Twitter now. what should be a huge network for social good tends not to be. And I don't know how to fix that, really, because it's a people problem. And I think the problem with all these things is as soon as you put a lot of people in one place, it all goes wrong. And we need to find a way of getting beyond that. People, I don't know, it's a weird social thing. I mean, I'm sure we're in the wrong business here. There's lots of people into the psychology and all the other aspects of how people behave that are probably watching all this and laughing, because the internet is one big experiment for them to figure out, how do humans really work, what are they good for, what are they going to do. But I wish actually they'd say something, say, actually guys, you don't want to do that, that's going in the wrong place. We probably need some guidance. Anyway, so let's go back to the network. Because we didn't have any fibre, I had to go at making some fibre. And I'll cut long story short, I've got too many words in these things, but not taking credit for it because an awful lot of people do it, but we made the argument to the Scottish Government that their network should be fibre when they did it, and it helped the UK Government to decide that their network should be fibre, and then we've got the gigabit project today that finally kills off all the sweating of copper assets. We've got the altnet networks, which is really good. That's a key because actually the thing I wanted to do wasn't just move broadcast to IP, it's actually about making it so that people can be part of this. When we have things in one place like Television Centre, and we built the UK up to have a number of regional centres because there was a bit of regional imbalance and people didn't like that, all we did was recreate London in other places. And that works to a degree, but it just creates the same pressures elsewhere. It'd be better if everybody can just do what they want from wherever they want and enjoy life wherever they are. And that's the key thing that the internet has given them. We can do that nowadays. And I tried to make the argument for that. And actually, we had a pandemic. People have bought the argument without having to argue it anymore. People now think, why can't we do this from everywhere? That pandemic was actually quite good for some things. It's actually moved us on quite a long way in terms of people now accept that TV, any internet, anything could be online. I don't think we need to worry about that. The thing we haven't done, though, is figured out how to make it particularly green. There's some things that just got ignored in the thunder of technology. A bit of it we learnt during the pandemic was, can we just stop making networks asymmetrical? It's stupid. When everyone is at home living their lives consuming or at home producing, there needs to be some balance in there. Sure, there may be not quite as much in or out, but actually it's easy to just make it symmetrical because then you're not predetermining what people can do with it in the future. So if you have any influence over these things, make networks symmetrical. That's all right, I'll whiz through these. Because this is the bit we actually came for, is the future. We've done 25 years, what are you going to do in the next 25 years? I think it's not really worth worrying about because I can make anything up here and talk for ages about it. It doesn't really matter because you don't know what the future is going to be. What I use as a way to decide where I'm going on these things is things out of science fiction, but they're not a playbook for how to do it. As people say, they're more a risk assessment for the future, so you should read those things and think, actually, do we really want to do that like that? But out of that, we told the BBC hierarchy that this AR/VR is okay, but it's probably not where we really want to go. You want to plug your SimStim in, plug straight into your brain, and people are working on that. And that's the future of broadcasting. And the future of the internet as well. It's been foretold. The future has already come back and told us that that's the future we're heading towards. The thing is, we've got to figure out how to actually make it okay. We've got to fix the climate so we're still here, which we can do with a lot of our technology. And hopefully there will be an internet that will be part of a green future and won't be just more of today with a slight greenwash. There's quite a lot more at stake here, and the internet does consume quite a lot of energy. And if it's going to be a central part of people's lives and basically the whole planet, we're going to have to get a lot more efficient at things, particularly data centres. Okay. Sorry if I went on a bit too long.